win World War II? If you ask an American, you might hear about the day that lives in infamy, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which brought America into the war, followed by the D-Day invasion, and finally, the atom bomb dropped on Japan. Ask a Greek, however, and you will hear about an earlier day that lives in infamy, October 28, 1940. Early that morning, Mussolini gave the Greeks 3 hours to decide whether to surrender or be invaded. Greece was small and poor, and the rest of Europe so far had fallen to the Axis armies quickly. And yet, to everybody's surprise, with flagrant disregard for the odds against them, the Greeks instead said, "OXI, no." Greeks, ever since, have celebrated October 28 as OXI Day. But really, we should all be celebrating this day, because it's the day that you stand up for your freedom and against the bullies and tyrants who are threatening you. Let me explain. In 1940, Mussolini, a delusional, narcissistic, racist, bully demagogue, wanted an easy victory to impress his buddy Hitler. He did the math. Poland had fallen to the Axis armies in 30 days, Holland, 5 days, France, 43 days, Albania, 5 days. Greece would be easy. But to Mussolini's great surprise, the Greeks said OXI to those demands. And the Greek Prime Minister, Metaxas, rallied his people, reported that day in the New York Times. "Greeks, we shall now prove whether we are worthy of our ancestors and of the liberty which our forefathers secured for us. Fight for the fatherland, your wives, your children, and sacred traditions." For 5 months, the Greeks drove the Italians running into the mountains of Albania. This was the first victory against the Axis powers since the war had begun. America, which would not yet enter the war for another year, the editorial cartoonist had a field day, as you see here in the New York World Telegram, showing little Greece with Mussolini on the run and the Greek gods ready to award the medals for marathon, sprinting, and diving. By Zeus, Greece has never seen such running as this. In his diary, a soldier recorded on November 7, 1940, "I met women who were carrying ammunition. One was 88 years old. Another one told me she had locked her kid in the shed so that she could go help the army." Mussolini and the world were reminded that Greeks have a long, proud, glorious tradition of OXI. In 480 BC, you may have heard the story of 300 Spartans that stood their ground and fought to the death so that the rest of Greece could rally and defeat the Persian invaders. Lesser known outside of Greece, in 1803, a village of Greek women and girls sang and danced and hurled themselves off a cliff rather than surrender to the Ottoman Empire ruler. Just last year, you may recall, the Greeks said OXI to further austerity measures by the European Union. Back to the 1940s. During all those months of fighting, unexpectedly, the Italians had to pull out of North Africa and finally get some help from the German army. Furious with the situation, Hitler decided to send in the mighty, undefeated German army and air force, as depicted here in the Charleston Gazette. Having knocked out Mussolini, now little Greece must face Hitler. In less than a month, Germany was marching on Athens. The prime minister shot himself in the head. They raised the swastika flag over the Acropolis. Legend has it that the Greek soldier ordered to take down the Greek flag, wrapped his body in it, and jumped to his death, where a plaque still commemorates this act of resistance. This may be legend, but there is a confirmed account that a few weeks later, 2 Greeks snuck in and tore down the swastika flag. On the Greek island of Crete, the fighting continued. Germany sent down 3,000 paratroopers that would be killed, torn limb from limb by civilians using axes, knives, whatever they could carry in their bare hands. Germany would never again use paratroopers to invade during World War II. In May 1941, Hitler, in a speech to the German parliament, said, "The Greek soldiers have fought with the greatest bravery. They capitulated only when further resistance became impossible." By the time Hitler finally got around to invading Russia, months too late, it would be winter when the Germans advanced toward Moscow, and the Russian winter would do serious damage to the Axis cause. The occupation years were terrible in Greece. The country lost a tenth of its population, including almost all of its Jewish population. But the spirit of OXI remained. On the island of Zakynthos, the Germans demanded that the mayor hand over a list of the island's 275 Jews. The mayor handed over a list of two names, his own and the bishop's. When pressed, the mayor said OXI, and the 275 Jews survived the war. Every Greek knows the story of OXI Day. So I thought. I know my family's story, how my grandfather answered the call to arms and later died of tuberculosis. But there are some cases where national pride has gotten in the way of a few facts conveniently. But Daxas's response wasn't technically OXI. It was, then this is war. And Mussolini didn't wait for that 3-hour ultimatum to be up. He started invading a little bit earlier. And it's not really a black and white democracy versus fascism story, because the Prime Minister of Greece was technically a dictator at that time, having been a dictator for the past 5 years up at that point. And Greece had strong cultural and diplomatic ties to Germany and Italy. So if Mussolini hadn't been a narcissistic demagogue, perhaps Greece would have remained neutral, perhaps even considered joining the other side. But the OXI Day Foundation in Washington, D.C. promotes many famous quotes about this Greek resistance, including one from Winston Churchill. Hence, we will no longer say that Greeks fight like heroes, but that heroes fight like Greeks. I could not confirm most of these quotes independently. The closest one I could confirm comes from Germany's Chief of Defense, who said something like this when he was about to be hanged at Nuremberg after the war. The unbelievably strong resistance of the Greeks delayed by several vital months the Germans' attack against Russia. If we didn't have this delay, the outcome would have been different. Thank God that it wasn't. And thank Greece for its courage and sacrifice in saying OXI on October 28th. On October 28th, let's all be Greeks and say OXI to bullying in all of its forms. Whether it's a foreign threat or the narcissistic, delusional demagogue we face today in our own country. Stand up, stand together, and say it with me. OXI. Thank you.